Good morning, everybody. All right, just turned 10 o'clock, so I want to get us started and kicked off here. I know we'll have folks joining on, but for those who have joined so far, I'm Stephanie Charrington. I am the Executive Director of the backbone of Eastside Pathways, and I'd like to invite you, those who may know the drill, to please go ahead and include in the chat box. And you can get to the chat box by the ribbon at the bottom of your screen if you move your cursor. And please include your name, the community, neighborhood, or organization with which you're affiliated, and your email address. We do like to help people make connections here. We offer a contact sheet in the summary that's sent out by the end of the day. If you do not want your name or contact information included in that sheet, please be sure to direct message Joe Trotty, who's on our team, and you can get to Joe also via that chat. So you can see right now, the default is to everybody. There's a little drop-down arrow, and you can specifically find Joe on that list to connect with him directly if you don't want to be added. So thank you for doing that. Everybody, it's important to, we want to again make sure that those connections are made and that contact information is available. So Joe, do you mind flipping slides, please? Thank you. So for those who might be new, this is the first time you're joining. This is something that is part of Eastside Pathways. Eastside Pathways, for those who don't know, is a collective impact effort here focused in East King County. We're one of 70 communities around the country working in this way to support or actually improve the way that organizations and individuals are working together so that we ultimately achieve better outcomes for children from cradle to career. During this crisis, however, the backbone, which is the staff of that partnership, our role in that partnership has been to convene and facilitate, bring together data, communication. We're shifting our focus as a backbone to support the broader community. So these are opportunities for all stakeholders to drop in and participate. And it is our way of being able to contribute to ultimately getting all the folks who might be in need. Not might be, there are many that are in need during this crisis, getting the supports and services that they need. There's a team in the backbone. I want to introduce them really quickly. So facilitating today is Kalika Curry. She can wave there. Thanks, Kalika. Also, one of our other community impact managers, facilitator, is Sandy Nathan. Peyton Richardson is our data officer. Joe Trotty, who I mentioned, is our communications person. And the person running the scenes from behind the scenes, running all the operations, is Vicky Yu. So thanks to the team for all your work in helping bring this together. Joe, if you want to flip to the next slide, just a couple of logistics. So I mentioned that these are from multiple stakeholders in the community. This is a drop-in style meeting. I do want to mention that we've had to beef up our security. We did get hacked last week in a convening, sadly. And so there's a new link that has been sent out with a password that's associated with it. So you guys probably just clicked on it, the password was processed, and you were able to get in. I did want to mention it, however, in case there's anybody that you refer to these calls and they go to our website, they can see that there's an opportunity to connect in, but they will need to request the password. All of you guys were sent the link that has the password associated. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there was added security that we put in place. I've already mentioned to folks, if you're able to, please share your video. It really, really is helpful to see people, make these personal face-to-face connections, because we're in this shelter in place. We can't make the physical connections, so it's helpful. And I also want to, and you can see on the video, it's showing you down here below where to find all that. The chat button is there as well. That is a big place where people are sharing information. For those who are joining on just now, please, I invite you to put your name, the neighborhood, community, or organization with which you're affiliated, and your contact information. That would be great. And I also just wanted to mention, for those who didn't hear it earlier, either in your box, that's the box that shows your name, or the box that shows your video, there is a little ellipses. So if you move your cursor, there's a dot, dot, dot up there. If you click on that, you can make sure that your name is showing up accurately. Sometimes it might just be an organization. Sometimes it is just some initials. It's really helpful, again, for people to see your name. Everybody's on mute initially. However, this is an interactive session, interactive gathering, and so we're going to be inviting people to share, unmuting yourself and sharing verbally. When you do that, we also invite you to please say your name. That's especially helpful for people who might be joining on the phone and not necessarily on video. And you can also see as well, we talked about the chat. There's a lot of information that's shared on chat, so please feel free to provide links, information there. We do summarize that and include that in the summary that's sent by the end of the day. This session is recorded, as are the breakout groups that we have in the latter part of the convening, and that too will be available by the end of the day. Of course, we invite you to take care of all of the needs that you may have. And let's move forward to Joe, if you don't mind changing the slides. For the purpose of these calls. So the original purpose of these calls, and kind of a phase one that we talked about, was we really just wanted to provide a forum in which organizations and people who had needs could be connected with individuals and organizations who had things that can be offered. So really making those connections was very, very important. That still is very important, thus the contact list. But we also now want to move to this new phase of really activating ourselves towards equitable results. And so not only is there this real-time sharing and reduction of duplication of gaps and making sure that supports and services are offered, we're strengthening relationships, and we are all wanting to make sure that we're taking action to move towards results, to make sure that those most in need are getting the supports and services. So that's how we're kind of shifting the design of these meetings moving forward. So now I'm going to turn it over to Peyton, our data officer, to provide a little data.
Thank you again, Stephanie, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for coming out on this Tuesday. So one of the things that we want to make sure to do as these calls continue and as we move forward is to start to allow some of the data that we've gathered and some of the data that we may, ask of you to inform both how we are, structuring our content and moving through, and also to help each of you figure out what are some of the gaps in the services and what are some of the continued improvements that you may be able to make. So there are two areas of really data that we've been looking at as the backbone, both how we as a backbone are doing, as EP is doing, and also what is the community doing. So this here is just a general infographic, just a summative information on how the calls have been thus far. This is our 7th virtual meeting, and after 6, these are some of the numbers that we've seen, and we're extremely grateful. This is just kind of a gratitude for all the folks that have given their time, resources to move through this work with us. So on the next slide, we'll just see a general summary of how the chats and the large group conversations have gone. And actually, there's been a significant amount of consistency among the kind of the large themes that have continued to emerge. And I think that that's really important as these calls have allowed each of you to really dig into what you feel the community and those that you serve are needing and wanting. And as we continue to move towards kind of move towards action, we want to make sure that we can continue to uplift each and every area and topic that comes up. So this again is just summary data, some of the bits of data that we are looking at as we design the calls and figure out where we can help each of you be most effective. And here we have this is just a summary from last week's exit poll. And the reason that we brought this up, I wanted to plug it, make sure that folks don't leave the call before taking it. You see the N is a little low there, so we want to make sure we have more folks clicking those buttons at the end of the meeting today. But so the question was essentially that prompt on the top, that participation in this virtual meeting is, and then we gave you the opportunity to pick each of those 5, or any of those, or all of those 5 options. And the way that we have spread it out is the first 2 in that little green box here, providing a sense of community and helping understand the resources, are really what we consider at EP to be phase 1. We wanted to set a foundation for the container, make sure that folks knew that, we're going to go through this period, this challenge together, and we want to make sure that we establish that community and let folks know where there is help and aid. And what we also see in that little yellow box, and those numbers are a little bit lower, and that's perfectly fine, kind of what we expected. As we move into phase 2, looking at wanting to build our calls around moving to action and making sure that we are empowering each of you to serve the community better, to know exactly where to take action, and the general question, to help you do your job as best you possibly can. And that is really those three bits for the phase 2 are really figuring out how we can continue to move to action, essentially, and how we can move this work forward beyond just identifying resources and moving to solutions. Joe, I'm going to ask you to move forward one slide, please. So one of the areas that we wanted to dive into today is doing a little bit of a journal prompt. And so for those who are on the phone, I will read this. And this is really just to give you an opportunity to sit and think, reflect, and either type in the chat box or share verbally. If you don't, I will try and lift up some of the things from the chat box, but if not, I strongly encourage folks to share verbally. So here, the prompt is that, in phase 2, these calls have been designed to drive more equitable results. And the question that I have is, who or what is missing in your work or practices to serve the community better? Again, who or what is missing in your work or practices to serve the community better? And some of the areas that we know that are, specific groups that, require assistance are, different age groups, different age populations, specifically folks that are not necessarily school-aged, folks with that are dealing with immigration status, folks with housing instability, English language learners, and then finally we have a catch-all for what populations are missing. So I'm going to give everybody a few minutes to think about. Feel free to unmute yourself and share verbally, or type in the chat box, who or what is missing in your work or practices to serve the community better in any of these groups, or please let us know if there are blind spots, that there are populations that are missing that are not listed there that you feel is necessary to serve your community better. So I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes to just think about this, and it'll help us as we get our mindset to move forward with today's call. All right, so as I wait for folks to continue to journal, I want to lift up a few things that I'm seeing in the chat here. Is that folks without internet access. I think that's really something that we definitely want to continue to raise up, and we will talk a little bit about that in the large group session. How are we actually bringing this information to folks? So that's really, really huge. And something that Christy Mintier said, that the newly needy, those who have never before needed to use services and, you know, have a sense of embarrassment around asking for help. I think that's also extremely, extremely important. Seeing a lot of internet access, as well as folks who may have the internet access. I know we talked about this a few calls ago, but may not know how to utilize that internet access. I always joke that the strongest internet I've ever experienced is at my grandmother's house, because she has no devices and has no idea how to use it. So I do understand that internet access is everywhere, but the ability to access it is not as prevalent. Housebound populations, and Helena did say that we want to focus on communities that are living with disabilities and folks of color, immigration-related communities, low-income, non-internet access communities. Very, very good. And someone lifted up, Tammy, thank you for that, that there are gaps in feeding, specifically in this example, Bellevue School District students who, you know, with the federally funded school lunch program. So Tammy, could you unmute and talk a little bit more about that? Like what some of those gaps are, or is there someone to speak about what those gaps might be?
Sure, Peyton. I think that I went to one of the drop-off points yesterday because it's in my neighborhood. And I think that some of the gaps are that folks are not understanding that this is a possibility, that they can order food online. I saw I heard a woman talking who picked it up, and it was her very first time picking up one of the online foods. And she said, "Can I do this every day?" And we were like, "Yes, you can." So I can't help but think that there are lots of families out there who are still, for whatever reason, either language or just internet access, unaware that this is out there for them. So I want to kind of still continue to brainstorm with this group and Nourishing Networks to see how we can solve that, because there's a gap with them knowing, and there's a gap with, you know, them using that service, because it's valuable right now. Especially, Peyton, if I can just bring it up, as many of you know, school closure has been extended to the end of the year. And that means that we need to get the word out there as soon as possible to families that the food lunch program is extended through all the way until June. So we need to get on this. So thanks.
Thank you, Tammy. I know that is incredibly important, and I'm sure it'll come up in the large group discussion, the governor's declaration that remote learning for the rest of the academic year. So thank you for bringing that up. I will just lift up a few other things in the chat that I think are especially pertinent. Is Alma did speak about, co-creating solutions with the Latino community. And I think that's incredibly important, because the community members are going to really have a strong, obviously, knowledge of what it is that they need. We have support for undocumented workers. And one that I think is also important is the issues of grief and loss that are not always, obviously there's a lot of loss and a lot of grief that's clearly going on, but for those who have, that are, grieving a lost celebration or a period of time, seniors in school, or however other many celebrations that might be missed. So being open to allow folks to grieve that loss as well. I am going to see if anyone else wanted to share before I hand it off. Thank you so much for each of you typing in the chat box. These are just some incredible responses. I don't have time to read all of them, but we will all see them, and I will read all of them before we send the chat out. But yes, thank you. And the last one I'll read is a little bit about vulnerable populations. Identifying children in neglectful or abusive home situations is certainly a gap. And before I go, I want to see if Alma had the opportunity or desire to share at all about co-creating solutions with the Latino community.
Hi, Nathan. Yes, this is Alma from ISO. Yes, I will say that sometimes we want share the resources with the community, and the intentions are really good, but sometimes we don't find the right direction to do it. Following the promotores model that we follow with to outreach the community, our model is like you go and ask the community which is the best way to deliver the services and deliver the information. And they have so much more ideas that we don't even think about it according with the situation they live in right on there. And sometimes it's good to just outreach to those communities and just figure it out together, the best way to create programs or to deliver those programs to the community. You know, because sometimes it's we used to do our model that everything we created something right here and we just deliver it there to the public, but we find out that it's a better outreach when we asking directly to the source.
Thank you. I know that's really, really important. So thank you for sharing that. And I just want folks to recognize that this is a continuous thought exercise as we look to kind of gather and hold both qualitative and quantitative collective data on where the gaps are, because they're there, and it's probably incumbent upon us to kind of figure out where those gaps are and who falls into those gaps and lift them up and then close the gaps so that we can be more equitable in all of our services. But I have gone over my time. I'm going to pass it to Kalika, who is going to facilitate us forward, starting with our gracious space.
Thank you, and thank you for those contributions. Definitely lifting up a theme here that I'm excited to continue to pull through this time together. So just really wanted to take pause to check in with everybody, see how you're doing, giving yourself a moment to check in. In our calls last week, we really put an emphasis on taking action, and I think Alma was speaking to that as well as Tammy. There's a lot of amazing work being done in our community, and we know that it's really critical that we take pause and we're intentional about self-care practices. So the effective question here is, or gracious space question is, what are you doing to sustain yourself? This idea of thrival, right? And the other question to follow up that is, who are you leaning into or taking with you, right? So this idea of co-design or co-development, thinking about who are you linking arms with when delivering these services or developing these solutions. So encouraging folks to use that chat box, make some notes for yourself, but just give you a couple moments to check in with yourself, and we're going to invite a couple people to unmute and share their answer to our question. While folks are still thinking here, I do want to kind of pull something from the Adaptive Leadership Handbook. And when we think about working adaptively, we know it's really critical for us to be healthy and well. We know just how our brains work when we're in survival mode. We want to go for those technical solutions. So in order to really step into that adaptive leadership stance, or to be able to think critically and think adaptively, it's really important that we are centered and fully present. And so that's where this question is really coming from, is thinking about what are those intentional things we're able to do for ourselves daily or weekly to help make sure that we're sustaining and healthy throughout this period.
Okay, I'll get this started. Gardening, playing in the dirt, getting down and getting dirty out in my backyard, making beautiful things grow. This little guy was laying in the dirt, so I had to bring him in, and it's sitting on my desk because Kalika said one of the things that she does for self-care is flowers. So I brought this camellia in and put it on my desk. So there you go. Thank you, Kalika.
That's great. I love seeing that beautiful flower you've grown.
Can I talk? Okay, this morning I figured out with my class meetings with my second graders how to show their videos so that I could see their faces. And with the news yesterday, it was heartbreaking for teachers, heartbreaking. When I saw their faces, every time it popped up, I just cried because it was just so great to see their faces, and that was so important. So that is my highlight of every day, is seeing them as their teacher. 9:30 to 10.
Wow, Tammy, thank you. Great. I'm going to invite one or two more people to share. I'm seeing some great things in the chat box here. A lot around Zoom, connecting virtually with family, choir practice. Walks, yoga, pets, +1 on all of that.
Can I add something?
Please.
I do want to say that this time's kind of maybe allowed me to have more time to cook at home and getting creative with different recipes has been refreshing, and it helps kind of take your mind off of negative news. So I would say try to experiment while you're home.
That's awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, thank you for having that moment. Loved the things that I was hearing as well as seeing the chat box. I think all the channels are, aside from the news, which isn't so great to hear, are really reinforcing how important it is to take good care of ourselves so that we can stay healthy. And I want to emphasize that for our work here together. Again, being able to work adaptively means you have to be coming from a place of being centered and being able to work from that front part of your brain. So really do emphasize that you're taking good care of yourself and getting out of that and play in the dirt and things like that. So thank you all for taking good care of yourselves. And then also emphasizing that idea of who are you taking with you. That's one of our working agreements as a team at the Backbone, is always take someone with you, that thought partnership. You know, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, Sandy is helping me co-facilitate watching that chat box and helping hold this space for you all. So thank you for that check-in. We're going to move on to the next slide here. Wanting to do a progress report for you all. On the last couple weeks, we've been using this time to have partners or folks on the call chime in and say what some of those wins are. We're going to be shifting this time a little bit over this next phase in our calls, because one of the things that we're doing when it comes to designing these calls for you all is looking at the themes that are coming up and making sure that the group composition, the people, the perspectives, the organizations that are on these calls help provide that information. I know I saw earlier in the chat box that OSPI, DSHS, CYFS, and DOH are not on these calls. And so I want you all to know that as the Backbone, when we're designing these meetings, we are thinking about who is on the calls and do we have all the perspectives we need to develop the solutions that we're seeing. I'm going to have us go to that next slide where you've seen this before. These are all the strategies or themes that you all have brought to these calls. You're also seeing the contributors that are at the table to develop those solutions. And to lean into what Alma was saying before, when we start with the technical, which is, what do I do really well? What is the value proposition of my organization? What is the service that we can provide to the community? We saw in the first couple weeks that everybody really ramped up to think about what can we do during this time to support our community. And now that that's up and running, we're starting to see, we're getting data on what's working and what's not working. And that's where we get into that clog of needing to work adaptively, right? We need people to provide that partnership to say, that's great, and here's what's missing. Or if you tweak this just a little bit, this might work a little bit better. And that's the purpose of this time together. So I just want to follow up on an action commitment I made last week in our breakout session. We had a lot of rich conversation around fear, around an increase in domestic violence, an increase in abuse, and things like that. And so one of the things that we recognized was there wasn't the perspective of the law enforcement on these calls to help inform or provide some facts or even tips to speak to that. As we know, our first responders and the like are really busy right now, and it's been challenging to get a hold of them. However, I did get some information from the Kirkland Police Department, and the only soundbite I really have to offer right now is that it's really critical, even if it's not an emergency, that you do call 911. The police department wants to be able to get that feedback or that data so they understand what's happening in the community and they can develop solutions and allocate resources as it relates to that. So I'm just going to give folks just a pause again to look at this, take some personal notes on what are the adaptive challenges that are coming up for you as it relates to the strategies, and leaning into Alma's voice here around who am I partnering with? Who am I trying to serve? And are they at the table with me? Am I having thought partnership with the people that I'm looking to provide services to during this time? So I'm going to give us just a moment to do some reflecting. Okay, thank you. I'm getting some chats here. I will make sure that we get YMCA of Greater Seattle. Heather, if you could specify a particular branch, unless it is the whole association, we'd love that information. And I also want to remind folks that this slide is available in our recap email, so you have more time to look at that. If there's things that missing, please feel free to chat, use that chat box function, or to shoot us an email, and we'll make sure you get added to that. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to the next slide. Okay, so this is the time in our meetings where we get to have large group conversation. We're lifting up topics that came from our last week's call. And really the effective question here we want people to think on as it relates to those topics is, what are the innovations you're making to drive those results? As I mentioned before, we see that folks were really ramping up the things that they knew they could do to support the community during this time, and wanting to think about how are you innovating those things? You know, examples have been given of, okay, we had a product and we translated it, or, you know, Judy had shared, now we're delivering those foods via bus. There's a lot of different examples folks have shared, and we just want to continue that thread. So I'm going to have us move on to the next slide so we can see those topics. So the topics we're lifting up from last week's call are information accessibility. So thinking about, we know a lot of the digital platforms are clogged, they're bogged down. Also thinking about how information is getting disseminated and packaged for organizations versus families. Also wanting to continue that dialogue around housing and rent, right? So this idea of, if folks are unemployed, what does this look like? Is rent in April being rolled into May? How is that setting folks up for success? And then lastly, wanting to talk about designing for the end user. This idea again around, who am I looking to serve, and am I crafting this idea that not one shoe fits all, wanting to have really targeted strategies and solutions for those end users, considering multiple dimensions of diversity, language, nationality, gender, marital status. There's lots of different ways that we can look at the populations. Again, thinking about this idea, we're hearing there's a lot of noise, right? There's multiple channels with lots of different information. It can kind of be overwhelming. And then also going to create some space for any other emergent or urgent topics. So Peyton is graciously going to be whiteboarding for us, or charting your voices. Please feel free to use the chat box or unmute yourself to respond. We've got about 20 minutes here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Kalika. So I just, first of all, I want to thank everybody. You have been a tremendous source of resources, and because we've been listening to you, here's what we've been able to do. First of all, thank you to Bellevue Art Museum for connecting us with Xfinity. We're now in conversations with them about getting PSAs out. That would be local information that would get out across the, working possibly with Kirkland and Redmond to get information out just for the East Side residents. The other thing is that last Friday, we were able to get about 2,500 non-electronic flyers out in English, Spanish, and Chinese. We're working on 4 more different languages, and because of Judy Buckmaster and Tammy's suggestion, we are now putting the food distribution map on the back of that flyer, and I'm hoping by tomorrow we will have another set of 2,500 to get out to the community. And I'm trying to think of, there's some other things that we've been doing, and I'm just pulling a blank. Oh, I did not know this, but because of Tammy and Judy, I learned this too. There is a food truck association group that is looking to see if there's a possible way that they can connect with the food group for additional food distribution. And I have sent that information to them. So I'm learning a whole lot of things, and we'll just keep going. So thank you for putting out there the ideas, and we just continue to see how we can respond.
Thanks, Helena, for sharing. This is Sandy Nathan. I'd like to invite Liliana from Teresa Point. She had lifted up information accessibility as a talk in the meeting that we had relating to social emotional learning. And I would like to invite her here to talk about the channels. The specific question that she had raised was relating to channels that are using to disseminate information and how they are checking on the effect of those channels. So Liliana, do you want to jump in and talk more to it, please?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for putting this together, because it's a great opportunity to share ideas and resources. As Sandy says, I've been talking to her, and I've been talking actually to Lake Washington School District about the same issues that you have been talking here. Like, there is a lot of communities that don't have internet access, that the language is a barrier, that maybe have the technology but don't know how to navigate it. But also there is, and was a point that was brought here today, like how to get the information to large groups, because there is a lot, but many people maybe are not aware how to go to all of those, and we need to find a way. So I brought an idea that I think that can work, or that we can work together and see if we can make it work. So we know that maybe not everybody have a computer, right, and internet access, but mostly everybody have a phone. So what we need to work on is to bring the information to their fingertips. What about if we all create, like what I'm going to say has 3 parts. So the first part is make a video where we explain to people, like, hey, let's say Eastside Pathways. I am Sandy from Eastside Pathways, and I am here to show you the directory that we have and how to navigate it. So we can categorize, right? Like rent assistance, food services, mental health services, all the services that we are offering, but by categories. So people, and we teach on that video how people can access each of those services as soon as they click on those points. As soon as we start the video, we can say, after this video, you are going, well, I have to explain the other part. What we need to do is we need to be able to send that video via text message, because everybody has a phone. So if we make it as easy as just a click with their fingertip, is going to be super easy for people. So the first thing is to send the link. Then when we open the video, just say, after this text message, you are going to receive a link with all the information that we are going to show you. And in this video, we are going to show you what comes next in that link and how to navigate it. Why? And we are going to ask you, we are going to say to the people, we are going to ask you to share with all your relatives and families and people that you know that can use this information. So it will be just one work on our side, but it can go long shot. Also, if we can make that video in different languages, it will be really helpful. If we can make it in English, in Spanish, we can help with the one in Spanish. We have done a bunch of, as you can see, we appear at Sistema Escolar USA, and what we do is we do educational videos for Latino parents, teaching them how the American educational system works. So we are very familiar with what we are talking about. And it's really helpful because it's a resource that people can go back over and over in case that they have a question or that they don't remember how to do it. So it's good, and it's also a good thing because each organization that is in this group have their own database, right? So each organization can share it within your members, and we are going to work first this way and then this way. You know what I mean? We are going to be able to spread the word even farther. Also, this practice, we can share this, we can share this just not with the East Side, because we in Sistema Escolar had been getting a lot of people from Pierce County asking us about resources. So what I really think is that we need to make it easier. Last week, I remember that somebody was saying that could be the possibility to have somebody who can make advertisements. So maybe we can use both ways. Maybe we can use the advertisements to say, you may receive a text message from your organization asking you first if you agree to receive text messages, let's say. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, if you receive, we have to make it very clear and universal, you know, like just one title so everybody will know. If you receive a text message saying like this title is from your organization, they wanted to help you to understand and to navigate, it's easier. And I think we can have better outreach and engagement. And actually, I think that it will be an easier way for people to share the information. And also because they are going to be able to find the information in just one place. They wouldn't have to go like to the city of Bellevue, to the city of Kirkland, to the city of Redmond. They will have just to go to one link that will help them to navigate the others. So that's our thing. And if we can make it in different languages, it will be really amazing, because even the elderly, they are very good at texting, so they can help us to share, and it's good. Please don't forget the piece of mental health, and also these can be helpful. We talked to Lake Washington about this idea specifically for the remote learning part. So this is a good idea also, and we will love to be able to discuss a little bit more with Issaquah School District and Bellevue School District about a couple of things that we can bring on that part. We can do it separately, but I just want to leave it here on the table. So I hope this idea at least will bring something to the table that we can work on. And as I said, we can help with the Spanish language, and we can help also to create the script for all the languages and being able to share it.
Thank you so much, Liliana. You've provided a lot of rich ideas and strategies that I think are really actionable. So I really appreciate you lifting those up, and some really great opportunities to apply to any of the solutions that you all are developing. Before we move into breakout, I want to make sure that we still have a little space to continue to talk about those other topics you all have lifted up, again, as it relates to housing or information accessibility. I know Liliana provided a lot of really great insights on information accessibility. And then also that idea of continuing to think about the end user, which she also spoke to as well. So any other updates? I also want to encourage people, if you can, to be looking at that chat box. There's a lot of rich information. Seeing groups like the YMCA or Chinese Information Services really speaking to some of the modifications or innovations that they've made in order to ensure that their services are being delivered effectively. So a couple more minutes here.
Could we hear from Benjamin Roldan Rojas? What's happening in service of Latino families in Bellevue?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Judy. So I think the bulk of the work has been from the FCCs, which has been managed by Melissa Slater, which is also in this conversation. So that has been kind of the biggest bulk of the work, which has been distributing food, helping families with resources, referring people to third parties regarding rental assistance and other things. So if Melissa wants to add anything in that regard, that would be great. The other part that we've been doing is also help parents navigate the systems. So one of the biggest conversations here was families, most of them have the computers. A lot of them have access to internet thanks to the partners, and they're really grateful. They said that they have family members in others in other school districts, and they don't hear the amount of benefits that are having in Bellevue. So they're saying yes, it's great, but one of the biggest struggles is how can they support their kids. They're also saying those kids that have special needs, you know, in the classroom setting, they have 2 or 3 adults, and when they come to their homes, there is only the mother and the father, which do not have the techniques or the expertise of how to handle them. So some of the things that we have heard from the community, but overall, families, at least from what I heard, they're really grateful. They're ready to move on, but definitely need more hands-on help in regards to how to do the teaching, how to get those supports in that regard. Melissa, I know you're in this conversation. If you'd like to add anything in regards to the FCCs.
If I can unmute, yes. So our Family Connection Center staff has been doing outreach to families they work with all year. So there are 12 staff members, and they work very closely with many of their families. Some of their families are in contact with every week. We have about 2,300, actually it's close to 2,400 students that, but a couple of things to know. What we're trying to do right now is determine which students have access or are being served by different programs, one of them being break time, meal time through LifeSpring. That's about 2,400 students. We have about 260 families being served by Jubilee Reach food program, the grocery program, which is outstanding. And they've helped with delivering food to some of our families that really need it, which is a huge, huge benefit. And then we also have a partnership through LifeSpring and Amazon that's allowing us to get promotion codes. They're like grocery store vouchers, but to our families that are experiencing homelessness but are living doubled, tripled, quadrupled up, so they have a reliable, stable address. And our FCC staff, they've been working on connecting families directly to those programs. And we're doing some cross-checking right now as well, because we're trying to figure out, like, of the 2,400 students, we hope that every family that needs access to at least 2 food programs has it. But we also know our numbers are closer to 3,600 in terms of free and reduced price lunch at the beginning of the school year. So we're doing cross-checking right now to figure out who are we missing, who are there, who are the students, who are the families that may need additional food support that don't get it right now, that may need something beyond our, the grab-and-go meal service that the district's providing. So there is, ongoing outreach. We're also trying, we have principals and teachers and counselors that are also actively doing outreach in school communities. So we're trying to do some coordination there as well, so that we can figure out who's making contact with families and just making sure that we're not missing people, because we know that there's a greater need, and we know that the need is growing every day. So while we're successfully working with some families, and it's a significant number, we still know the need is greater. So
thank you. Thank you. We do have just a few more minutes here. I want to lift up this example of knowing that we have representation and organizations that are focused on the Latinx, Hispanic, Latino community. You can see by having those resources in that organization how we're able to really hone in those services and serve those communities. So I see that really as a call to action to think about how are we organizing, being really thoughtful and systemic around serving those other populations. So I think I'm starting to hear that thought, and I know that that's been a lot of the work that's been happening in our community. So, you know, big shout out to the teams and groups and organizations that have been able to do that, and want to encourage us to continue to think about how do we develop relationships with those communities so that we can co-create with them. I'm going to also tag my friend Eric Hark with the Kirkland Police Department. Hopefully you saw my private chat. I didn't see Ron earlier, and I really do want to create just a few moments here for Eric, if you could. As I mentioned earlier, our last call, there was a lot of conversations around wanting to get that voice and perspective from a police department to help address some of the issues that have come up. So if I can, I'm going to tap you on the shoulder to speak.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have the password to get in, so I was a little bit late to the meeting today.
Thanks,
so yeah, Kalika sent me an email. Just sounds like you guys are just doing some awesome work, just inviting us. So I just kind of, it's my first meeting, figured I'd just kind of check in, kind of see what's going on, and to be able to kind of answer any questions that people might have. It's a really interesting time for law enforcement. How we're trying to change to kind of this whole practice of social distancing and looking at our procedures and the way that we're doing things. I didn't see the text that you ended up sending. Some just interesting things that we've been seeing though is a huge number of online reporting. I think last month, might have been our first month that we seem to be getting more reports coming in from online reports than versus people calling, which has kind of been the traditional way that we've been doing things. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes how we're able to handle things. And we're here for, I'm here for any kind of questions that people might have.
Thank you, Eric. Is there any specific questions folks have as it relates to the police department or community fear or law enforcement? Just have a minute or two before we go into breakout.
I just have a quick question. I read in the Seattle Times yesterday that downtown Seattle is having a lot of problems with burglary. And I just wondered if you've seen that over on the east side the same way they're having it in downtown Seattle.
Yeah, so and I wouldn't have data for all of Eastside, right? Just working for the City of Kirkland Police Department, I'm only kind of talking about City of Kirkland data. What we've kind of seen is, and there's a little bit of there's some fleshing out of the data that we have to go through before I can say like, hey, like this is like the official like commercial burglary numbers. We kind of separate residential burglaries versus what we call non-residential burglaries. But a non-residential burglary can be something like a suspect breaking into like a detached carport, right? That's a non-residence. So sometimes it kind of gets lumped in together. So with people staying home, our initial figures for last month is essentially almost like a drop in residential burglaries by 60-something%, and then an increase in non-residential burglaries almost by that same amount. But I don't want to necessarily say that that's all just commercial burglaries. That can be things like storage units, detached carports, and those kind of things. So it would kind of make sense, I guess, from a statistic standpoint, that if people are staying home during the day, which is typically when we would have residential burglaries, because people are out of their houses, right? So we're seeing a drop in that, but then people breaking into other non-occupied structures, essentially. So it's really just kind of a initial data set. We can kind of look into those cases to say, like, wait, do we really want to call these commercial burglaries versus a non-residential burglary? But overall, I don't know that the overall numbers of burglaries are necessarily up. Just the patterns of how they're occurring seem to be changing from our initial data.
Hey, thank you, Eric. I look forward to having you on the call, or someone from the police department. I know you all are busy, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I'm going to move us into breakout, or Vicky, as I should say. She's going to magically transport us into breakout session, wanting to continue to pull this thread about thinking about who am I working with. Now that we've got a lot of amazing programs and resources up and running, starting to do that deeper adaptive work to think about who is my end user and how can I really target the solutions or strategies to meet those folks. This breakout session is a great opportunity to get thought partnership. So before, if you hadn't been on our last call, the last couple weeks, what we're doing is grouping you by topic. In these breakout sessions, we're not doing that because we want you to get a fresh set of eyes, a fresh perspective. So working someone who doesn't necessarily work in the same field as you or the same scope of work is a really great opportunity to get some thought partnership. So when you're moving into these breakout sessions, I want you to think about, what is it that I'm trying to deliver and who am I trying to deliver it to? And we want to be able to utilize this breakout session time to get that thought partnership, that adaptive leadership, right? Again, naming that the backbone is working hard, and we want to encourage you to also think about who can you talk to in between or invite to jump on these calls. So like I gave the example of, I reached out to my friends in the police departments and said, hey, we need that perspective on the call. So again, our effective question is, how is the worker services you're providing impacting the different populations in our community? So that's a question I want you to carry over. We will see you in breakout session in just a moment. Thank you, Vicki.
How are you? This is Joe Trotty with Eastside Pathways. Nice to see you all. How many folks do we have here? Oh, we got a decent amount. All right, so what I would ask you to do is think about the questions that Kalika has posed. And when you first make sure that you're on mute, but when you speak up, make sure, one, you unmute, and two, that you first introduce yourself and the organization you're with, if you're with an organization, just so folks know you. I don't think we can make the assumption that they can. And it sounds like somebody is doing what I do, which is shuffling a lot of papers, but you are not on mute. So if you could look to that, I would appreciate it. So does anyone want to start off talking about, or the discussion as far as what you're delivering, who you're delivering it to, how is that impacting the populations, how's that landing on it, hits, misses, those types of things. Anybody want to kick us off? Oh, come on. I know that you folks aren't that shy.
I can start.
Yeah, thank you, Marisol.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisol, and I work for the Issaquah School Foundation. Our program bridges communities with the education and the larger community here in Issaquah. It's very challenging right now as we are navigating these uncharted waters, trying to share all the information that it is there, just because it's being made very quickly and changing super fast, and having a lot of information and trying to decide what it is important to share and what is not, it's challenging. And one of the biggest things that we share is about what's happening in our school district. And the information is always very broad, very with terms that in English are difficult to understand, but when you translate them, they make no sense. So we reach families with this information and they are like, what do you want me to do with this? So trying to be very cautious on what we share and how do we share it, it's important. We want the families to understand, we want everybody to understand what we are trying to say, and we want them to, keep information, I don't want to say limited, but short and sweet, say.
Yeah, I totally understand that. That's one of the challenges and one of the #1 rules of crisis communications is you don't want to add noise. You want to add value, but you don't want to add more noise to the channel, and duplicate efforts necessarily if it's going to confuse people or you're not able to keep up on the information that you yourself are providing. So I appreciate that. How are you, I mean, I know it's a daily struggle, Marisol. Are you getting any advice or help from any other organizations on how to prioritize or how to present that information?
So one of the, I'm super grateful to being able to be in this community, larger community, just because I believe that Issaquah sometimes, many times is seen as a community that doesn't necessarily use a lot of resources, just because it's not as big as others, let's say Bellevue or, other communities, just to name some. We are a very needed community. We need a lot of resources here too. And just trying to help families navigate through those obstacles, it's hard. Our food bank is one of the busiest, I will say right now. It's really, I mean, it's super great that people are accessing those resources. And at the same time, it's like, we have this resource, how can we make it bigger so we can have a bigger impact? So this is a good channel for me just to understand and to see what is out there, what is happening. And at the same time is, if we have anything in Issaquah that we can help, we can
Okay.
share it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to chime in on that, or any other observations about communities they're serving and how that's landing on them?
Well, this is Alex O'Reilly from the city of Bellevue. And I wanted to just say that, all the human services planners from the 5 Eastside cities get together virtually on a call twice a week for an hour to share information about what's happening in our different communities and to look at advocacy responses that are going to help support the providers that are, struggling, like Marisol was talking about, to serve the community. So, for example, we're making sure that the Eastside voice is heard when there are funding rounds to make sure that Eastside voice is heard and agencies on the Eastside do receive funding. Another thing that we've done, because again, we don't work directly with the clients necessarily from the agencies, but we want to support the nonprofit agencies so they can do their work. So one of the other things that we put together that many of our agencies are completing is we have a Google Doc that was shared with all of the nonprofit agencies, and we're asking them to put in what their needs are. So, it might be, we need more computers for our staff, we need more donations of masks or whatever, and we're all trying to look at these lists of needs and try as best we can to funnel them to the right places. And that's something that I think is important so that we can just make sure that the community agencies have the resources they need as much as we can do. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing in collaboration to address some of the many needs that we're seeing and hearing about from the agencies.
Interesting. That's great. How are you making sure that connection, that kind of through line all the way to the folks that need it and that are using it is as robust as it can be? That you got all, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, we have, we outreach a lot to a number of our agencies. For example, those that provide emergency financial assistance. So we've been in conversation to them to be sure that their eligibility standards and their outreach to the community is as seamless as possible. So that's been a recent effort we've had because we want to be sure that people who need the help get the help. Another group that we've been really very active with is the agencies that provide shelter to people who are experiencing homelessness. And so there's a lot of needs there. So there are pockets of different types of services that we are in very close contact with, but no, we could do better in terms of outreaching to other services as well. But those are a couple of examples of where we are making sure that we're in, even twice a week contact with the providers for those kinds of services.
Yeah, that's great. And how is that similar, and how is that different than what the Chamber of Commerce is doing? Because I know they have that site to connect people.
Right. Well, what our experience has been so far, and actually King County has one as well on their webpage. We just discovered that the other day. What we're finding is that in some ways it's duplicative, but I think the agencies are posting their needs on all kinds of sites because they never know if, who's looking at different sites. So like somebody on the chamber website, which is wonderful, may connect with an agency, but they get their needs met, as opposed to, maybe the other site that we have, people didn't happen to look there, So even though it does seem duplicative, I think in this crisis, we appreciate that the agencies want to get the word out in as many places as possible. And, because again, people are coming from all different directions, the business community, United Way, our websites, the different cities have websites, or this other Google Doc I was mentioning. So yeah, we're trying to connect people to the right places, but I have to say, I think people are reaching out in many different places.
Great.
Hi, if I can just contribute. I'm Helen from the Chinese Information and Service Center. And I think this is really a great topic in regards to sort of leveraging and partnership. I think what I'm seeing, and we know that racialized communities of color, are already marginalized, and then having services that to me are, and programs that are being implemented during this pandemic and crisis, but potentially not reaching out to those that are most marginalized. I think some of my concerns are immigrant serving agencies like CISC are a good bridge, but we don't have the funding or the resources. And I often think about even smaller community-based organizations that are doing this work but can't be at this table. So how do we really make sure that as we're talking about funding or partnerships, that we include all these organizations, and that we're asking them as the direct experts. I don't do a lot of frontline, but I'm part of the meetings where people are saying there's a 3-hour wait. We're translating, as Marisol was saying, employment forms that are changing at the moment. We're having families, that are really in crisis, and we can't get to the main agencies to get the service that they need, and particularly on the appropriate language. So I just want to put it out there that let's continue to look at these community-based agencies, but also acknowledge that, leverage them so that they can also be the experts in voicing what are those concerns and needs, and then developing programs that really do reach out to these to the communities that need it the most.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Helen. I appreciate that. It looks like we got a little over a minute before we're going to be whisked back to the main room. I will do my best to summarize, but if I misstate or if I've left something out, please feel free to jump in and help me out, help a guy out. Anybody else? We've got about a minute. Anyone else want to take an opportunity? All right, well, I know when we come back as well that Peyton, our data officer, is going to ask folks to participate in a poll, and please do that. We really are we're data driven, right? Because we're that's kind of part of our DNA. So please give us the data that will help us do this work even better. It's much appreciated. That's part of collective impact.
You're doing that for everybody, Christina, correct?
Yes. So we provide 500 meals every night, warm meals, dinners for the families.
Thank you. And is everybody getting that information in the same way that it's available?
So the directors of those clubhouses are reaching out to all of those families, and they all know the time that they're going to be dropping off, and they send like their kids or their spouse to come and get it. We do have it like an email go out to those families, but it's not necessarily something that we're posting online for everyone. It's for those like the homeless kids, the parents that, or the kids that live in KCHA housing or low income properties around the area as of right now, because that's what we can sustain, thanks to a funder of ours that is paying for those meals. Mm-hmm. And then T-Mobile is helping shuttle those meals over to those sites. So.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Christy, can I ask a question? Where are there any clubhouses that are close to the Crossroads area? That's
yes.
Okay.
So if families needed meals, they could go to our Eastside Terrace location. Do you know where Super Supplements is?
Yep.
So it's literally the complex right above, and we have a clubhouse right there. And between, I think they're starting at 4 o'clock is when they start handing out meals.
Okay. So it's 500 with all of them, or 500 at each location?
500 in total through the 3 locations. Yeah.
Okay. In 3 locations. Thanks, Christy.
Hey, Christy, one other follow-up question on that. Are you finding that all of those meals are going, like people are really accessing that, or are there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes. All of them have been, yeah. I mean, we've had families that have come and started crying because that's like the only meal that they're getting, a hot meal at that, right? So we have one of the meals comes from Biss on Main, who are making like steaks and potatoes and stuff for these families. A lot of these meals that, you know, they're not necessarily cooking for themselves because they don't have the money to provide that kind of meal for their families. So, you know, it's a healthy meal for those families. It's not just a packaged meal that they're, you know, they could pop in the oven. It's something that they're actually getting some nutrition out of.
Yeah.
Christy, I have a question for you. So Attain Housing actually has the property right above Super Supplements and right before the Voice. And we have 6 families there. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if this is something that we could partner with, because we're starting to, meals are not something we normally have provided, but we're starting to get much more involved with our families, trying to provide them groceries and meals. But we're small, and I'm wondering if this is something that, you know, we could talk more about.
Yeah, I think that we can definitely do that. I know that we already serve 2 of your families that live at that location. So we know that they're getting the meals from us as well.
Oh, good. You know more than I do.
I used to be the director at Eastside Terrace years ago. So I've known all of the families that have come in and out of that transitional housing. And then I was here helping out starting in September at Eastside Terrace as well. So I know a lot of the families that live in that transitional housing right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, Christy, would you mind dropping in your email address just into the chat?
Yeah,
so that Kathy has it. That'd be great. I love the example that you're talking about. So it's, you know, Boys and Girls Club doing something different. And I also heard you mention a restaurant, a business. Biz on Main isn't just passing out food from their restaurant saying come by. They're actually working differently to serve different populations. So
absolutely,
that is the thinking that we're trying to encourage people to continuously do. You know, the example I think several weeks ago was the school district was providing food via the buses. You know, they were dropping off food, but there were other barriers that were in place that we just didn't think through. And I think part of that is bringing somebody along, partnering with the community to say, how can we co-develop this so it really works for everybody? So thank you for that.
Stephanie, we still have the gap with the Bellevue School District, the federally funded meals. There's still a significant gap that I am thinking that what are some ways that we can let the families know that this is available? This is a, you know, there are lots of locations. I've put together a couple flyers, both from Bellevue School District, the website of what the availability is. And what I'd like to see is I'd like to see that flyer, and it's only specific for food and BSD. Get that flyer double-sided and get it into the Boys and Girls Club. Get it all over the place. Make sure that that gets broadcast everywhere. it really doesn't address any of the concerns of, the financial need and all that, but I'm really focused in on the food and making sure everyone knows where they get free food.
Yeah.
No
Liliana,
questions asked.
thank you, Tammy. Liliana, I know you offered some tremendous ideas and support for that, really around video, like creating a video. I'm wondering, Tammy, if that might be something that food services, is it food services from the school districts that are doing it?
I've asked if maybe we could get them into the conversation as well, get food services to find out what are the barriers, what are the federal barriers that are there. I know that one of them is that they were existing with the free and reduced lunch sites. The areas of need and the summer feeding, but I don't know if that's still a barrier that's still there, and I don't know.
I have a suggestion for that. First, as I said, one of the things that we actually suggest to Lake Washington School District was to make it easier for families to understand. So if we have like a flyer, we have to have a flyer just with the places and the times where they can go. We said if they have to go to a link every day to pre-order meals, that's not going to work. They are not going to do it. But if we just make a flyer really simple, come to these places this day, if they can go and fill out a form, a hard paper form, where they can fill out a form, not daily, but for a week, it's going to be easier in their side, like meaning the school district side, because kitchen will know, like we'll have the orders for the entire week, right? Families will be out of their mind that, oh, I forgot to order the meal, so I have to do it this way. So we are trying to make it easier. And now that you are from Bellevue School District, we are also talking to Lake Washington School District. And this is something that we would like to talk to you as well. It's about the remote learning. A lot of kids are without access, not because the district is not making efforts on inform, it's just because the channels are not the right channels. That's what it is. I can offer, as I said, we have Sistema Escolar USA. In that platform, we have more than 2,000 people. A lot of those are from here, and they are really, really good on sharing information. So if you want, you can share with me the flyer, and I can share that flyer over there, and I can ask the people that I know to work, like spreading the information. I know that we can do a good job doing that, but definitely I think that working on a text message where we can, because it's going to make it easier also. If we let the people know, look, if you need food services, this is the phone number where you have to call in that video. If you need technical support, this is the phone number where you have to go. Or if you have technical, or if you have like problems with the technology, this is a quick troubleshooter that you can go on and do it yourself, right? It's going to make it way easier. I think the problem is not that the districts are not putting the information out. I think that the problem is the channel. That's what I think it is.
Hey, Tammy, you might be on mute.
Helena, I definitely want to connect with you offline. And I also want you to connect with Benjamin Roldan, who's now with the Bellevue School District, to get those channels open, because I think he's trying to do it, but I don't think it's going to happen to the degree that we need it to happen until we start making these offline connections. Thanks, Stephanie.
You bet. Liliana, I can send you Benjamin's email so I can make that connection. I'll take that action commitment. And Tammy, is there anybody else from Bellevue School District that might need to be included on this from food services, or are you able to carry that forward?
I'm going to try. That's what I'm working on right now. I mean, that's my focus this week, is to make sure that we get accurate information from food services and make sure that people know there are 3 location sites in Bellevue School District where there are no questions asked. You walk in, it's called grab and go. There are a number of sites where you have to pre-order the food. And so that's a barrier right now. So we're trying to fix that barrier.
Great. Okay, we have about a minute left before we'll be transported back to our large group. Any other offering that folks want to put out there in terms of how you're thinking about things differently for serving different communities? Any of these ideas are super helpful for others when they hear them.
I just want to share with you one more thing. Something that we did was we make a video teaching the people how to change the language on their school districts' websites. So that was really good and successful, not just for our school district, but for school districts along Washington. In case that you want it, I can share, or I can make one in English so you can have it and understand it, because the one that I made was in Spanish.
Yeah, that would be great, Liliana. If you can offer that if there's a link that you can put in the chat, that would be great. I know it's in Spanish,
Okay.
but it's something that I'll bring up in the summary as well when we go back to our large group.
Okay.
I'll point that out. So we have about 10 more seconds. So I just wanted to say thanks for sharing, you guys. It was this is really, really important because it sparks ideas for others, and I really appreciate it. We'll see you in the large group.
We'll be, assigning them with certain subjects that they need to complete in order to graduate program. They don't need to pass final exams, as versus GED that you have to, in order to earn a GED, you need to pass four exams. This is a quick way, and each college is actually offering the program a little bit different. So I'm talking about the Renton Technical College, in partnership with the library. But yeah, it is different from college to college. Some of the programs, are offered in campus. This one is off campus. So the students go, again, once a week, they attend classes, and then they do their own study at home, and they deliver the assignments. So did you have a better idea about what, and high school is, high school 21 plus is for students 21 and older, although it looks like they are losing up those, age restrictions, but they still offering the program for 21 plus, students. So older than 21, that's the only requirement. We are also partnering with Goodwill, so Goodwill is paying for tuition, so this is completely free program. And Goodwill is also offering wrap-around services. They have a social worker, a case manager that comes and offer other, resources to the students.
Thank you. It's really helpful. And
sure,
as we look at the different populations in the community, I think that's one of them that we consider is, basically individuals who are out of school age, but who aren't quite, heads of household or something like that, and kind of where do they fall? So it's always good to hear about those.
Yes, and it's very flexible. It's a very flexible program, and we are, really it deals with equity, because we are trying to, really target those students who drop out from high school, and so they needed their diploma in order to go to college. So this is we are targeting here the educational gap. So yeah, a lot of people didn't finish high school, and it's required to do different things like going back to college or for other reasons. So.
Right. No, thank you so much. I know that we don't have too much time here, but that's incredibly helpful. I wanted to make sure that to see if anyone else that has joined wanted to talk a little bit about how their services are impacting different populations in the community as we all kind of shift and pivot and address these different challenges. So I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Oh,
Jamie, do you want to say anything about Kids Quest?
Jamie did speak about Kids Quest.
I spoke first.
Sorry, I had to take a call. I was
okay.
multitasking. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. One, unless, and folks can feel free to jump in. I think one of the things that we are also considering, a lot of the call today is focused on the gaps, and as we move forward, trying to close those gaps. So when you think about the services and programs that you're providing, can you think about, you know, as those services are provided and really landing on the folks that you want them to, are there other folks that are in the gaps that may not get the services? You know, like Teresa said, folks who may, you know, want to take on this GED program but not have the, you know, all of a sudden they don't have access to internet, so that might change their ability to do so. So are there other demographics and populations that any of you feel are getting missed by your services or other services that you see or that you've heard about?
Jamie, did you talk about parents and parents as teachers and how it affected the news of no school really affected a lot of children yesterday and their parents and their teachers. I just think the ripple effect is going to be pretty big in terms of managing and stress and anxiety and depression. There's just a lot of that happening.
And I think that's something that is, yeah, I think you put it best, it will have a ripple effect. So I want to make sure that we lift up that, you know, the stress and like just the general social and mental well-being of caretakers, parents, students. Like this is just another thing on top of all the other things that we're all challenged with.
Exactly. I got a lot of calls and emails and texts yesterday around that from teachers and parents trying to talk to their kids about it. It was really a tough afternoon, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have about I've got my little countdown clock, so we have about one minute left. This has been super helpful. And I just wanted to, you know, thank you all for joining us, but see if there were any final closing notes on populations within the gaps, or, you know, how, again, I keep reiterating, but how the programs and services that you're putting out there are really, really helping. But this has been super helpful.
Hey, yeah, this is Michael with the YMCA Seattle. I think, yeah, just something that we've been realizing with some of the work that we've been doing that's helped is there's this age gap when it comes to food access for adults, and not necessarily seniors, not necessarily, you know, youth, but just kind of that, you know, they've aged out of a child nutrition program. So whether that's like an older teen or a young 20-something, or even honestly just some of the parents of children that we're seeing attending our programming struggling with food access, I think that is a definite gap when it comes to servicing the communities that we're at.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is as we continue to talk about solutions, that age gap of post high school is hard. So we're about to jump in. Thank you again.
All right, welcome back. I see we've got folks jumping back into this large group. I know sometimes it can kind of be disoriented as we're virtually being moved around. If you don't, make sure you've got your chat box open. I know sometimes I need to reopen mine as I'm being transitioned. Again, there's a lot of rich information in there. Before we do our breakout session report out that the backbone staff will be providing, you're going to see a participant poll pop up on your screen. I think Peyton mentioned this earlier. We really want to get you feedback from you all as participants, so the backbone continue to improve these virtual meeting spaces. We want to make sure that we're driving the results here for you in this time. 90 minutes is not a lot of time, but there's a lot of rich connections that are being made, and we hope that this is just really that touch point for you to kind of get that thought partnership, and that you're activating this time to do the work in between meetings. Again, emphasizing what Peyton was saying earlier around, we saw some really great feedback on what's been done to date, but now we're going to move into that next phase. So I'm going to stop there. Please make sure you're completing that survey. Looking to see that we hit that 42 mark, and then we will switch to doing our summaries from breakout. About halfway there. While folks are completing that survey, again, I really want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump on these calls. I know that they're quick, but it's just an amazing opportunity to connect with other people in the community, to spark some new ideas. And know that these meetings are being designed on a daily basis to carry through the work that you all are bringing to these calls. And we're going to continue to design exercises and thought partnership to help drive the results that we're all looking to meet. I'm going to have Sandy Nathan, our co-facilitator today, close out the meeting. Before I pass the mic, I'm going to provide the summary for my breakout session. I know it seemed really, really quick, so not that we got to solutions, but we were able to hear a lot of great information on where people were either stuck or really focused on how they could work strategically. Some of the themes that I heard in that space were really this idea of, we know what we do really well in the community, but whether it's related to funding or a lack of supply line, it's really just challenging the vision. How do you continue to sustain or deliver those things, whether it's because of that lack in there or that ambiguity of understanding what is this timeline going to look like? There was also some conversations around really focused and strategic funding practices that were done for existing partners. And then also thinking about knowing that we have an increase in number in, one participant spoke to the newly needy, knowing that those numbers are growing in areas. So needing to be able to grow those resources and pipelines, even considering what the current timeline looks like. I want to invite anybody else for my breakout session if there was other thoughts that wanted to be lifted up. The only other thing I can think of was just this idea of, now that we've got this robust list, and we've talked about this before, when you've got this repository, how do you organize it so that's ingestible and effective for the people that you've collected all that information for? So anybody else for my breakout session who wants to chime in and share any other themes or summaries, feel free to do so. Thank you again so much for joining today, and I'm going to jump off because I have to hop onto another meeting.
Thanks, Kalika. Is there anybody else from Kalika's group that wants to chime in?
Well, I probably want to emphasize Kalika's last comment, which was when we are working with communities, it's really important to include the community in these decisions, because they know best what it is. And I experienced that firsthand. I thought when I reached the families that I knew what they need. So I came already with a predetermined mindset and kind of a product already created. And while I was providing it, I figured out that the needs were elsewhere. So I had to recreate it all again and start all over. So I think for efficiency matters, even though it seems it takes a little longer, just to include them in the conversations. And I think the results will be more effective.
Excellent. Thank you so much for lifting up that critical point, Benjamin. I would now like to invite Stephanie to summarize for her group.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Sandy. So we had an opportunity to uplift. Christy shared from the Boys and Girls Club some of the things that they're doing differently. We had a big discussion around food and how thinking about how we're getting access to food out there differently. They are offering at the Boys and Girls Club and in particular with KCHA, they're offering meals out there. But she talked about how those meals are also being offered by private businesses. So Biz on Main is not necessarily just offering food out of their location. They're working with other partners to get that food to people who need it, which is fantastic. So thinking differently about how to serve different populations. One thing I just wanted to also lift up from our group was, again, about discussions on food. Tammy offered again that the federally funded food program is not necessarily meeting all the needs out there. Liliana was in our group. She shared a great possible technical fix that may work for men. That is not only the video idea that she shared earlier, but families register for food online is a barrier for many families. And then being able to actually use paper forms to allow people to register for that food and just say, this is what I need for the week, is going to be actually possibly much more effective for many people out there. So it's a technical fix, but it's one that actually I think would could be very, very valuable. And she shared that. The other thing that she shared too, and you'll see that in the chat box, I asked her to include it, is a link for families. It's in Spanish, but it specifically shows families how to change the language on the school district's website so that they can get access to that information in a form that meets their needs. So again, that link is up there. It's in Spanish right now, but feel free to pass that out to any of your constituents for whom you think that might be valuable. So to my group, is there anything else that you feel like we need to uplift for the larger group that I may have missed? All right, thanks everybody.
Yep, thank you, Stephanie. Can I invite now Peyton to share a summary from his group, please?
Yes, thank you, Sandy. So we talked about a few things, but one of the themes that came up was kind of the age groups and the age gaps that are associated with it. You know, we talked about what Kids Quest is doing now that they serve a younger population, and now that kids are out of school, how can they continue to serve their students with both virtual and kind of physical solutions, distributing kits and making sure that they have some programming. Additionally, how do the different age groups, specifically parents, teachers, and school-age kids, really deal with and come to terms with the fact that they will not be going back to school at all this year, and the stress and the grief that adds. I think that is a growing, because it just happened yesterday, a growing concern for a lot of providers, and that is a need that I think is not necessarily just for one demographic group, but for many different ones. So I think that's really something that can continue to be lifted up. And we also talked about, kind of a KCLS is adapting programming for all ages, but specifically around GED programs and making sure that those programs can continue, even though times have changed so drastically, making sure that technology is available to continue a sense of community and kind of the accomplishment that these folks that are enrolled in a lot of these programs are undergoing. And in terms of age, we talked about kids, parents, and teachers, but also then young adults. I think Michael from the Y in Seattle talked about how the young adults that are aged out of kind of federally funded school programs, what are we doing for those kids? I know that I think Stephanie or a few people might have spoken about that in their previous group. So again, we really focused on how the programs and that are focused on different ages are responding to challenges that are kind of very germane to those ages. And I'll let anyone else from the group, if they have anything else to share, or if they wanted to add anything to my summary, please do so.
Okay, looks like you did a great job, Peyton. Can I invite Joe now to please summarize for his group?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. So a couple of areas of focus that seemed to bubble up was Marisol, as well as Helen Wong from CISC brought this up, was the idea of getting information translated for folks in a timely manner, because things are changing so quickly and the information on documents is changing quickly and new documents are being created all the time. So trying to make sure that the information sharing is relevant, because it's also, as Marisol brought up, you have to be careful about what you share. Not careful, but you have to choose what you share wisely so you don't add too much noise, but you want to add relevant information, and you want to make sure that the information, that the translations are accurate and that they make sense to the affected populations, and that they're the most recent, because again, it seems to be changing very rapidly, all of the information on these forms that needs to be made accessible to a bunch of different groups. Alex O'Reilly from City of Bellevue also brought up that they are meeting Twice a week, their human service planners are meeting twice a week to share info on advocacy responses, how they're supporting providers, ensuring that Eastside voices are lifted up when it comes to funding decisions. They also have a Google Doc that they are sharing with nonprofits where they can put in what their needs are. And just ensuring that doing what they can to make sure that the voices are being heard through a lot of active outreach to agencies and providers. And let's see. I mean, those are kind of the high points that I have in my notes. Anyone else from my breakout session want to jump in and clarify anything or add anything, please do so.
Hey, Joe, it's Stephanie. And Alex, if you're still on, I would like to invite you to share that link for the nonprofit organizations that are updating. I know we've shared that, we shared it last week, I believe, but it might be an opportunity to share that link again for folks to have. So hopefully, Alex, if you're on, you can do that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. So I will jump in to give a summary for my group. And Colleen just from United Way was in my group, and she just shared about promoting 211 as a resource. I'd also like to add that as a group, we had some robust conversations about recognizing how important it is, even more so in these times, to think about your end user and pivot solutions and get innovative in the way that solutions are being created and the information about them is being shared. So Colleen from United Way spoke about funding the right agencies and expanding funds to POC grantees. Tanya from Semina spoke about how mental health support has been recognized as very critical in these times. They're having community-based fitness classes open for everyone. While they do have online sessions for their preschool, they're also opening the services up for the wider community. We had Alba speak about how there has been a need that they have recognized in these times to upskill their core team on their technology skills so that they can support the community better. They're staying connected with families via phone, texting, and trying to move on to the virtual platform. Jessie from Rainier Athletes spoke about being connected with teachers and having a Google Hangout link where 70 of their mentors are available to render support to their students and families. And they are collecting data from teachers, which I thought was really interesting and a very important thing for all these different stakeholders to stay connected. They're collecting data from teachers on the participation of students in their online classrooms and ensuring that these mentors can reach out to students who are not actively participating to figure out immediate needs and be able to support the students. They're also sharing information via text and email and translating information into Spanish. Marlene from Pantry Pack spoke about using school coordinators and repurposing capacity and also partnering with Grab and Go so that youth can have food packs available on Fridays from 6:30 a.m. to noon so that they have food during the weekend. We had Eric from the police department speak again to the increase in mental health needs and how they are supporting. They have a radar program where they're working with mental health professionals. And this is a service that's available twice a week. He did mention about the challenges of having to move trainings to an online platform and how that's being a sort of a clog in their plan. BSF, Bellevue Schools Foundation, spoke about flexible funding and ensuring that the greatest needs get funded in these times instead of programs. So we had some robust conversation in every breakout. Thank you for sharing. Anybody wants to add anything else before I hand it off to Stephanie to close us out today? Thank you so much. Please keep collecting all that data from the resources that you're providing because we need all that data to galvanize this message. And now I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie to close us out.
Thanks, Sandy. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who participated in this survey. before we did the summary that is really, really helpful for us. I will tell you, these calls, this team, we spend a lot of time on putting these together. We spend at least 2 to 3 hours for every one of these calls and planning. And the input that you guys are providing is really, really important. So thank you for doing that. I also want to just emphasize again and give a big shout out to everybody. You know, Helena, I'm going to point you out because you kicked us off today, but you always do such a great job in bringing back to this group the actions that you and others that with whom you're bringing along are taking action. And I so appreciate that, because at the end of the day, these convenings are great, the connections are great to fill the gaps, but it's really when we're all taking and activating ourselves and taking that personal action and connecting with people to ultimately provide the supports and services that are most needed in our community right now. So I really appreciate everybody doing that. The action doesn't happen in these calls. The action happens outside of and between these calls. These calls are meant for you to make the connections and then everybody working together. So I really, really appreciate all the work that folks are doing out there. Again, we're doing these twice a week, 10 a.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're committed to do these until April 24th. And at that point, we'll evaluate. So I really appreciate, again, everybody participating, and we'll see you on Thursday. Until then, be well. Take care.